high as the infrastructure part of what we're working on at the National League of Cities, and how important this is for your communities. I think transportation relates not just to the I and the infrastructure part, but also the E part, the economy and economic development in our communities. We all know that without having robust federal investment in our local priorities and transportation infrastructure, that our economies would not be able to function. So I want to talk about some of the provisions in the FAST Act on active transportation, bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure. And some of these have been touched on already, but I'll talk about these. And Matt and I are working with the Transportation and Infrastructure Services Policy Committee for the League. We're going to be having a series of webinars over the course of this year where we're going to help you learn and understand how you can best take advantage of the federal funding sources that are available for municipalities to accomplish the priorities that you have in transportation. And one of our focuses is always bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure. I was very happy to hear President Colbert-King specifically mention trails, because trails are the lifeblood of many communities around the country, as a source of both recreational tourism and transportation, and a way for people to get around, especially low-income people, low-income communities, people who need safe bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure to be able to get around. So, in terms of the FAST Act, it was a kind of a mixed bag for active transportation for bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure. We were happy that we managed to hold the line. There were significant cuts to funding in these projects in the 2012 bill, MAP 21. So we were happy to see, and as some of the debates were coming up over the past year, there was some question brought up as to whether the federal government should be like the federal government helps local communities invest in transit and roads, whether or not the federal government should also be involved in supporting active transportation networks. But we really feel that the argument won out that this is part of a comprehensive transportation network, and that bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure is as important to our communities, is equally important to our communities. We need to make sure that people are able to walk and bike safely to wherever they need to go. So there were some good provisions. We had maintained levels of funding for the Transportation Alternatives Program, which David mentioned. We got some good provisions regarding bicycle and pedestrian safety in the bill. And we also got some provisions in the bill to make TIPIA, the TIPIA program, which is a financing program to help local governments finance important transportation projects, to make that more accessible to municipalities for smaller projects, like bicycle and pedestrian projects. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. But first of all, I want to talk about the Transportation Alternatives Program. David already mentioned it, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. But the Surface Transportation Program now includes the Transportation Alternatives Program. TAP has been around for a number of years as a separate program, but the FAST Act included it in what's called the Surface Transportation. It's now called the Surface Transportation Block Grant Program, what was previously known as the Surface Transportation Program. The Surface Transportation Program is a pretty broad, all-encompassing program that is now established as a block grant. So it basically gives money to states and to metropolitan areas to spend it's pretty flexible. You can spend it on transit, you can spend it on roads, you can spend it on active transportation, but now it's money that is just sort of handed down to allocate by the states and MPOs in the metropolitan areas. The way that it works, and this is a victory for the National League of Cities. Previously it was